Welcome everyone. If you could please join us by sitting in your seats. ضيوفنا الكرام، يمكنكم الانضمام إلى هذه الجلسة النقاشية من خلال الجلوس في مقاعدكم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. مع تسارع الجهود العالمية الرامية إلى حماية الطبيعة، تسلط هذه الجلسة الضوء على السبل التي تتيح للمجتمعات وقف استنزاف الطبيعة وعكس مساره من خلال حلول منهجية تستند إلى أسس علمية راسخة. ويعد النهج الإيجابي للطبيعة فرصة واعدة لاستعادة النظم البيئية ودعم التنوع البيولوجي وتعزيز القدرة على التكيف مع تغير المناخ، مع تحقيق منافع اقتصادية واجتماعية ملموسة في الوقت ذاته. ستتناول هذه المناقشة عدداً من المحاور الرئيسة، من بينها مفهوم النهج الإيجابي للطبيعة وسبل قياسه، والتحديات التي تواجه الكوكب مثل التلوث وتغير المناخ واستخدام الأراضي لأغراض مختلفة. كما ستتطرق إلى دور الابتكار والتمويل في تحفيز العمل البيئي واستعراض إمكانات السياحة البيئية في دعم جهود المحافظة على الطبيعة، وستتنوع وجهات النظر من بين مؤسسات دولية مرموقة وخبراء محليين، لتسلط الضوء طبعاً على مشروعات وأبحاث جارية في دولة قطر. Please join me to welcome to the stage the moderator of this interesting panel discussion, Mr. Nick Clark, Environment Editor and Anchor, Al Jazeera English.
Good to see you here. Thanks very much indeed for joining us this afternoon. It's a very important session. It's a very exciting session towards a nature-positive planet. The challenges and the opportunities. The opportunities because there are many, despite the mess that's going on in the world at the moment. It's going to be a fantastic panel. We've got a great lineup, and there'll be much to take away at the end of it as we understand what a nature-positive planet means and what it means for us all. Now, the way it's going to work, we're going to have a couple of presentations first, and then we're going to have a panel discussion. So let's get the panel up on stage first. So I'm going to do those introductions now, and then we'll crack on with the presentations. So first up, Jane Madgwick. Jane is a distinguished ecologist and author with over 3 decades of experience in the field of wetlands and water management. If you'd like to sit here, thank you. She spent 19 years as CEO of Wetlands International and the last 2 years as Executive Director of the Global Commons Alliance. Welcome, Jane. And then we have Gretel Aguilar, who's Director General of the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. 30 years of experience in conservation and sustainable development, and you are passionate about the rights of indigenous peoples and how their knowledge must be in mainstream conservation policy. Welcome. And finally, for now, Dr. Radwan Ben Hamadou, who's Director of Research, Policy and Development at our hosts, Earthna. Radwan has 20 years of experience in marine environmental management, and at Earthna, he leads initiatives to bridge academic research with policy, driving sustainability here in Qatar. Now, as I say, before we get into this discussion, we have 2 presentations. In a minute, we'll hear from former WWF Chief Marco Lambertini, who will join us on stage in about 10 minutes or so. But first, we have the world-renowned interactive artist, Thijs Beersdekker, from the Woven Foundation, who translates the complexity of science into something that people can resonate with. Thijs, over to you.
Hello. Wait, let me hide this up a bit. Is this okay? Perfect. Oh, that's an awkward picture. Let's start. Oh, here we go. So, hello, welcome. And first of all, I want to thank all of you, and especially the Earthna Foundation, and especially Dr. Gonzalo, because a year ago, he introduced me to my new mentor, a mentor that taught me how to navigate this world, this difficult world of biodiversity loss that we're facing. And over the year, she has been teaching me some really life important lessons. How to deal with resilience, how to deal with scarcity, how to deal with keeping your resources, and the moment when it rains, you actually spread your seeds, you solidify your roots, you grow. And by now, you probably figured out, I'm not talking about a person, I'm talking about a plant, kahal. And kahal, the name is Arbanabia hestemissa. I'm not really good at pronouncing scientific names, but I'm really good at communicating science and bringing that to the heads of states and the hearts of the public. Because the issues that we're going to hear about in the next panel is going to be challenging, it's complex, and the biodiversity crisis is unimaginable. The climate crisis, the impact of that is unimaginable. The political crisis at this time is also unimaginable. And what I believe, this is her, if something is unimaginable, it becomes unactionable. So I don't believe we're only in a climate crisis, in a biodiversity crisis, a political crisis, but we are in an imagination crisis. And, well, I might be biased here, but speaking to the imagination, that's one of the core parts of art. Let me give you an example. You will notice when one tree is being cut down in your backyard, but if 1 million trees are being cut down every day in the Amazon, that's hard to imagine. So we created this sculpture together with UNESCO, and we took the data from their researchers, and every leaf that you see here disappearing, it's 100 square meters of rainforest being cut down right now in the Amazon. It's a data-driven sculpture that updates every time. It lets you imagine, it lets you understand it, it makes it relatable, and it makes you feel the data. And I think that's one of the most important things that we need to do. We need to start feeling the facts. And we need to get the facts right, because facts do not move people, emotions do. We do not live in a science-based society. We live in an emotional-driven society. And when we're talking about emotions, well, I might be biased here again, but emotions, that's the core part of art. Let me give you a small example, like a really tiny example. A small, obscure research paper about how one cigarette butt, it can pollute 50 liters of water every day. So we found this paper and we started to pump around this 50 liters of water in this sculpture. It made people feel the facts. You could see the single impact of this one cigarette butt. And the research paper got read 10,000 times. The work got shared hundreds of millions of times, just by adding the emotions. And it even got shared 30 million times in Germany alone. And I don't know how you know about Germans and emotions, but I think that's a really good accomplishment. Wait. Oh, well. Sorry, there was a black slide there. So we need to teach scientists to communicate better. We need to turn their complexity of their science into a compelling worldview. If we want to move to this nature-positive world, we need strong leaders that can vocalize it better. We need people to explain what's happening to our planet in a way that's relatable, accessible, understandable, personal. Because before we know it, we're walking into the supermarket and there's no chocolate anymore. Food security is going to be a big issue. And who is there to comfort us if there's no chocolate anymore, right? So with that, I'm going to show something new to you. So this is also a bit scary for me. We created a new work. You're the first ones who are going to see this. It's a work where we connected the begin and the end of a food chain, where we have the cacao tree in Indonesia. We hooked it up with sensors, And then on the other side in China, we created a digital copy of the tree. And with the data, you could see how the tree was growing in real time. How from this plantation, the air quality, the soil moist, the CO2, the change in its climate was transferred directly to its digital copy. And next to this, they're selling the actual chocolate bar. It's connecting the whole supply chain. It creates this emotional connection. And of course, this is making it relatable, understandable, and if you agree with me, it's beautiful. But beauty is not a luxury. Beauty is not valuable. Beauty is a survival strategy. Because if I go back to Cajal, her flowers are there to attract pollinators. They're there to spread the seeds, just like art can do with attracting people to spread their messages. We did the same thing at the COP15 in Montreal, where we took the negotiation data. We worked together with scientists. They put a framework on that, and based on that, you could see, oh, wait, sorry. You could see, oh, you could really see, no. Come on. Can you play the movie again? Well, you could see. So we took the data from the negotiations. We put it into the artwork, and it was moving up and down, making the policymakers a bit nervous because they saw the impact of the negotiation in real time. People came to us saying, how's the plan doing? Are we doing well? And the space around this work changed. The space around this work changed into a campfire of soft politics. Heads of state talked to the scientists directly. Policymakers mingled. And in this time of where politics are hardening, I think we need to create more spaces like this, where we can meet each other again. And I might be biased again, but I think that is one of the core functions of art at this moment. So, with that, we've solved it all. No, that's not true. I still want to stick my head in the ground. Who has the same feeling right now? One person? No, that's not true. Two people. I think we can also raise our hands, because we all should stick our heads in the ground. Because under the ground, something amazing is happening. Under the ground, trees talk to each other. They share nutrients. They share warning signals. They keep each other strong and healthy as one. What you can see here is the work we created together with Stefano Mancuso, where we took the data from 2 pines and we trained 2 AIs to communicate with each other like you were there under the ground with them, moving from one side to the other. This is really weird, sorry for this. We did do the testing. Oh, yeah. So you could see it moving. This is 12 meters wide. And you could see the sap flows. You can see how they communicate with each other. And if you were there in the room and you were breathing, it made you a part of the work itself, making you feel part of something bigger. And I think with that, that is our most important lesson today. That is what the whole nature positive movement is doing. That is creating something that we want to belong to. So if we can listen to Cajal, wait for the right moment, when it's raining, when it's going dark. In this time, sea will let go of her seeds, spreads her knowledge, solidifies its roots when it rains. And I think today, globally, it's raining. So I think the moment for this nature positive movement is now. Thank you.
Thijs Bierstek, everybody, fantastic. I think in this area where communication and science is pretty stuck, that was a wonderful demonstration of making the intangible tangible and the remote seem close. Just a very quick question, Thijs. Do you have any metrics or any means of kind of measuring the response you get to your art and how popular it's become and the impact it might have?
Well, I think one side of it is always how many visitors, how many people. Then online it spreads millions and millions of times more. But I do think everything matters. So it doesn't matter how big or small, but if it fits this ecosystem of communication, if it fits this ecosystem of what everybody is doing here today, we need to find ways to, different angles to communicate the importance. And I think art speaking to the imagination has one of the most urgent topics, but I might be biased there.
Yeah, as you say, because today it's raining.
Yeah.
All right, Thijs, thanks very much indeed. And if you want to see more of Thijs in about an hour's time, he'll be on the Agora stage with me and another panel if you'd like to see more. So thanks very much indeed. Okay, so now let's welcome Marco Lambertini onto the stage. Marco ran the WWF organization from, 2014 to 23. Before that, he was global director at BirdLife International, and now the convener of the Nature Positive Initiative. He has had a lifetime in conservation, and we're very lucky to be able to hear from Marco. Over to you.
Nick, thank you so much. First of all, lovely to be on stage with you, and thank you to Earthna for the invitation. Having said that, if I knew I was going to speak after an artist presentation, probably I would have reconsidered my participation. I'm joking. This is a super exciting opportunity to talk about the concept of nature positive in this region of the world. So let me just start by saying, ladies and gentlemen, that I believe we're living truly in extraordinary times, times of paradoxes, times of crises, challenges, and also, of course, times of opportunities too. And the opportunity for this generation, not the next one, for this generation of living humans, is to avoid what scientists call planetary tipping points, points of no return where the Earth system will start behaving differently from what they've been doing until now, and embrace a turning point instead in our relationship, the most important relationship of all, our relationship with nature, our mother, our lifeline, our major contributor to our health, happiness, and prosperity. In the last 200 years, actually in the last 70 years, particularly after the end of the Second World War, humanity has embarked on an incredible journey of astonishing progress in so many different ways, technological, but also in terms of quality of life. Of course, inequitably distributed around the world, but if you think about the beginning of the 20th century, where 40% of newborns didn't reach the age of puberty, where the average life expectancy was below 50 years, and now the child mortality is less than 5%, and life expectancy over 70. If you look at the fact that 75% of people, again at the beginning of the 20th century, were in dire poverty, and today that figure is 10%. Still unacceptable, but major progress around the world. GDP from 9 trillion to 100 trillion. Humanity has developed in an incredible way. Population, of course, as a consequence, boosted. When I was born, we were about not even 3 billion people on the planet. In my own lifetime, we tripled, almost. Economic growth in many regions of the world, again, with a lot of inequality, unfortunately, but overall, we can say that probably there's never been a better time for humans on this planet. But all this was hiding, maybe conveniently or inadvertently, a darker side. And the darker side is what has happened to nature. In other words, we've been developing and conquering all these major improvements at the expenses of the natural world. This is an economy that has thrived over the consumption and the utilization of natural resources, nature services, but at the same time destroying them. It's an economy that is destroying its own foundation. That cannot go on for much longer. So the great rise of humanity has been paralleled by the great decline of nature. And this is the paradox, the development paradox of today. the paradox that we need to come to terms with and embrace in terms of moving to a different model. And today, as a consequence of that, this is what the world looks like. These colors are not random. These colors actually replicate exactly, over the years, in the last 50 years, the increase of global temperatures and the decrease of abundance of life, of biodiversity on the planet. That's what the world that we made in less than 50 years, hotter and with less life. And climate change and nature loss are the two interconnected dimensions that are reinforcing each other. Climate change is driving nature loss is exacerbating climate change. And if you think that 90% of the heat that we produce with our cars, industrial activities, air condition, heating around the world, 54%, more than half of all the CO2 emissions that we emit with our activities have been until now neutralized by nature. Imagine if nature loses the ability to contribute in this way. The planet will become very quickly a very difficult place for us. Now, this is the doom and gloom, but actually this is science speaking today. In all this, there is a positive side. And the positive side is that today we know. Today we know much more than we ever known about all this. Impacts, consequences. Today we are the most environmentally aware generation of all time. And in that awareness lies hope and lies, of course, the change, the seed for change. This is not NGOs or green movements survey. This is the World Economic Forum global risk analysis they do every year. And this year, in January, you can see on a 10-year horizon, which is really not very long term, half of the risks are environmental. And the two top risks identified by business and society are climate change, extreme weather events, and biodiversity loss. So we are at an inflection point where the world has also agreed, and this is a great sign of that awareness, has agreed that we need to embark a carbon neutral, net zero emissions, and a nature positive, net positive biodiversity. Because for nature, net zero is not good enough. Nature can come back if you give it a chance. We have so many examples around the world. And that's the, if you like, double compass that will drive our society through a safer and sustainable future. And we know what to do. We need to protect more of the nature left to the planet, and we need to restore what we can, what we destroyed or degraded. The target the world gives itself is 30%, but we know that we need to protect more than that over time. The most challenging part is that in order to achieve that, we need to transition economic sectors that today are nature negative into nature positive ones. Top of the list, agriculture, the way we produce food, fishing, forestry, extractive infrastructures. And finally, we need to redirect financial flows, public and private, to support those transitions. Today, we are spending almost 3 trillion per year in subsidizing activities which are harmful to climate and nature. 3 trillion. Is more than all the global military spending. Is like we are waging a war on nature, like if nature is our worst enemy. And just conclude, in order to achieve the goal of climate, carbon neutrality and net zero emissions, we have all the tools that we need. We have identified a clear metric, we have identified the goal, it is measurable. We can track progress in that direction. And in fact, we know that we are behind, but at least we know that we are behind. On nature, the picture is much more complex, fragmented. There are too many metrics, there are too many ways of measuring biodiversity recovery and biodiversity loss. And I think we need to move into a much better balance between having metrics that drive action, that are science-based and credible, but also practical, understandable. Back to Ty's point, try not to make nature even more complex than actually it is. And there are metrics, and there is a process now, in fact, both Jane and Gretel as part of this process, to try to align on a number of metrics that can help society, governments, communities, business, investors to measure their contribution to nature positive. And let me finish with this quote that you may have heard before, because it's a very famous quote. It was Winston Churchill, I think, in 1936, when basically, Britain decided to get into the Second World War and at the start of the... But if you read this same sentence, not thinking of the Second World War in 1936, but actually thinking about the situation we are today in relation with nature, it's exactly the same thing. Past neglect, ignoring plainest warning that nature is sending us every day. The era of procrastination and half measures is gone, must go. And in its place, we are entering a period of consequences. That's, for me, is the perfect quote to end the presentation with an invitation to act, an invitation to embrace change. Because it's the great rise of humanity and the great decline of nature that has paralleled that, has now brought us to what we can call the great threat that we're facing, but also the great awareness of that threat. Today, we are at the point of inflection. Today is the time of the great choice. Choice that could stick to the nature negative direction, or a choice that can embrace the great transition to a nature positive future. Because, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, there is not going to be any other way to secure a people positive future unless we embrace a nature positive one. Thank you.
Marco Lambertini, everybody. So Marco, we're just going to bring you into the fold of the conversation. So please take a seat. The time for harsh measures is gone. Okay, Jane, I'd like to start with you. As part of this whole nature positive movement, we have planetary boundaries. Can you tell us a little bit about them? You worked alongside others, I think, on this breakthrough science. And the point is it limits what in an ideal world barriers that we shouldn't cross to ensure a stable planet, I think. So explain that a bit more for us, and how can nature positive strategies help countries stay inside those boundaries?
Thanks, Nick, and also very grateful to be back here in Doha in this summit. Yeah, planetary boundaries isn't a new concept. It's been around 15 years now, I think. I mean, that's a very simple concept, and that people depend on nature and natural resources for food, water, etc. But there's a limit to what the Earth can give. So that idea has been around for a while. What's relatively new is to really be precise about what these limits are, and what is really safe for the planet. If you forget about humans for a while and just, what will allow the planet to go on in a reasonably stable, resilient condition. But also adding to that, what do people need in this planet? And so in the last 2 years, the science has evolved dramatically to give us really the metrics on what's safe for the planet and what's also just, in the sense of what are the requirements of nature and the natural systems, the thresholds, not just climate, but all the natural systems alongside, which we need to get to in order that we can have a prosperous, safe, and equitable future for everyone on the planet. So we now know those numbers, we now know those metrics. So in a way, there's no excuse. We know the destination, we know the size of the landing strip. And
the size of the landing strip is actually pretty small.
It's getting smaller all the time.
I mean,
and yeah, so there are many layers to explain, but we are outside 6 of the 9 critical natural systems.
So the wrong side.
The wrong
of the
side.
Boundary.
Yeah, we're in the red zone of 6 of those, and critically, there are 9 systems, but 2 of them are more important than the others, because in combination or by themselves, they can push the whole planet off into a catastrophic decline. So one being climate, which we know, climate change, we're going fast in the wrong direction, crossing that threshold. But the second one, just as important, is the condition of the biosphere. That's the thin living strip that's on the planet. And as Marco mentioned, these 2 interact. So we can't solve the climate problem. We can't limit climate change without restoring the condition of nature on the planet. Actually, all the climate models and their predictions that are out there are based on the assumption that nature didn't decline. Well, nature is accelerating in decline. And so it's not surprising that what we now see and witness in terms of the indicators of climate change are more severe than those models were predicting. And the biosphere is really the key also for humanity. So what the planet needs, what's very interesting on the metrics, what the planet needs in terms of intact, functional, genetically diverse nature is pretty close to what people need as well. So this should dispel this whole idea that, yes, it's nice and good to do something for nature, but isn't it more important to look after the development of people? These two are really dependent on the same natural resources.
They go hand in hand. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because there's a lot of controversy about this concept of inventing systems that can draw CO2 out of the atmosphere. It already exists. It's there in the natural world, right?
Yes, nature is supreme technology in terms of pulling carbon out of the air or keeping carbon in the ground in the terms of wetlands. So most people know, even if they don't understand the science, that cutting down trees, especially in the tropical forest, is a bad thing for the climate. But I would say equally drainage of wetlands is extremely bad. That's releasing enormous amounts of carbon into the air in terms of carbon dioxide and methane. Just simple drainage, which was not long ago thought as a good thing for development. And now there's a whole business at reversing drainage to restore nature and natural functioning and draw the carbon out of the air.
Okay, Gretel, I'd like to bring you in. So we have this nature positive vision, but it is, I mean, given the state of the planet, it is systemic change on a massive scale, isn't it? How is the IUCN helping countries translate that aim into reality? That's the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, of which you are the boss.
Thank you very much. And please allow me first to thank Earthna Qatar Foundation and Gonzalo Castro for the kind invitation to be here. In terms of IUCN, the International Union for Conservation of Nature, you know, first I have to say that nature positive is not just an environmental necessity, but it's a social and an economic imperative. So what we are hearing here is not just about environment and about saving, you know, the trees and saving the species. It's about us. It's about us humans. And if we think, you know, if we think about in practical terms, what do we need to do? Yes, we know that the planet is in a pretty bad shape. Marco just explained that. We know that there are solutions. We have, I don't know how many conferences of the parties of the many different international conventions. We have heard the speeches many times. So why is it that we're not doing it? You know, it's the question that I think we all need to ask ourselves. If we know the state of the planet, if we know what we need to do, why we're not doing it? We are intelligent people.
Why do you think it is?
I think, honestly, that first of all, we need to put the problems in simple words and explain to the massive population and not just stay with a few that will understand the complicated things. Second, and this is where IUCN comes, I think we have to bring the tools and explain those tools in a very simple and clear way. You know, if we're going to talk about, one of the tools that IUCN has, for example, is a nature-based solution standard. But if I say nature-based solutions standard, I want to know how many here in the room understand what is that. Oh. Okay, I see a few hands here. Good. But not many, not all the room. And it's very simple. It's just nature-based solution is how nature itself is helping us. So for example, if we conserve mangroves, what are we gaining? What are we gaining? Are we gaining, that mangroves absorb carbon and the planet can be in better shape? Are we gaining that our fishermen will be in a better place? Are we gaining security for our coastal systems? So yes, we need a standard. Why? Because we don't want to say that everything that we do will help nature. So when we talk about nature-based solutions, being these restoring ecosystems by planting trees or saving mangroves, we need to know that this is the right thing to do. And that's why we have a standard. Also, IUCN is well known by the red list of threatened species. Many of you have seen this. We are the ones who tell the world what species are about to disappear and what species are doing well. But if I tell you here that the Arabian oryx, which is from this region, or the sea dugong, is doing well or not, then you will understand that we can put all the species of this planet and tell you how are they doing. But more importantly, we can tell you how to save them. Mm-hmm. So we have many of these tools that we use in IUCN. We also put together a red list of ecosystems. So today, we can tell any country how many and what type of ecosystems you have for what, to help the countries plan, to help the countries say, okay, I have this and this and this and this other type of ecosystem. I can plan, I can make economic sense of my decisions, and I can put nature at the center of the country's planning, not just at the center of a Minister of Environment of Climate Change, but at the center of the decision-taking of a country, because we depend on nature for food security, for the air we breathe, for health, for so many things that we don't see, normally. We take many things for granted, but actually, nature is our best ally.
Right. So good for the planet, but good for humanity too. And Gretel there, Radwan, mentioned 3 species that are pertinent to where we are right now here in Qatar with the dugong, the oryx, and indeed mangroves, and mangrove restoration projects is what's happening here in Qatar. It's very important. And I guess it's important to put a lens on nations like Qatar, because it can give a valuable insight into what nature positive means in countries that are not considered to be, mega diverse.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. And in the name of Earthna, welcome everyone. Definitely, Qatar might not be considered a mega diverse in terms of number of species, but the ecosystems that we do have here and some of these species that are living on them are unique and valuable, and I will explain why. First, the country is under a big environmental stress. It's a hyper-arid, high temperature, extreme salinity in the marine environment, but still life is there. From resilient coral reefs or seagrasses, from, as it was mentioned, for very salt-tolerant mangroves, we do have a resistance and an adaptation that went through thousands of years, that created some ecosystems that are thriving under conditions that elsewhere they would not be surviving. We do have corals that survive 36 degrees in the water. That's for other places in the world that's not possible. Even if we have the hottest sea in the world, during the summer, we have the biggest aggregation of whale sharks that are in the world that are appearing here in Qatar. We have the second largest aggregation of dugongs. So life is thriving here, but what we can understand is that adaptation, that is the highest and the richest value that we can get from our nature here. So positive nature in Qatar is not just saving the species or halting their loss, but it's also preserving those adaptation strategies, those biological processes that resulted in such adaptation, so that other places also in the world can understand how those happened, and we can help in assisted evolution, for example, and helping them adapting to the future climate conditions.
Marco, what do you make of that and everything that Radwan is saying there, especially this concept of thousands, millions of years of evolution, and yet what you're talking about has got to be done a lot quicker, isn't it?
Yes, but I think what you were discussing with Gretel about why we are not taking care of nature is really the question. And I can try to give two perspectives on this. The first one is something that goes back to our origin. Because let's not forget, for 99%, maybe even more, of our history as a species, as humans on the planet, we've been living in a nature which was dominant, was super rich, but also was very tough. I mean, it's not a coincidence, it's not by chance that we decided to extract ourselves from nature. Begin to build huts first, and then houses, and then cities, and then... Because living in nature is super tough. And as I said earlier, it's just the last 200 years that we begin to actually, reduce our threat from malnutrition, diseases, starvation, all the things that were absolutely the norm until, just a fraction of the time we've been on the planet. So this been, and back to Gretel's point, you use this word, take for granted. This is exactly what's happening. On one hand, nature, is nice, but, let's keep it outside our houses, or maybe bring in some flowers just to look good. But actually, we are taking nature for granted because nature has always been there for us. Now that nature is declining, we are struggling to internalize all that, and we continue to take nature for granted, as if nature is infinitely resilient, if the natural resources are infinite, as if at the end of the day, nature will come back and will continue to provide for us. Science is telling us there are moments, and that was Jane was talking about, the tipping points. Those are something new. Nick, we never experienced, nobody in 4 billion years of life on Earth, there's never been a situation like this, where actually one species is driving entire systems to change, and then suffering as a consequence, which is, of course, the crazy part of it. But if you think about, so that's one first thing is culturally. We need to stop taking nature for granted, understand that if we do affect nature beyond a certain limit, we'll pay a dear price. The last thing, very quickly, is actually about the economic system. So today, nature, if you think about it, is valued economically only when it's dead. A tree standing in a forest counts nothing. As soon as you cut it, becomes valuable. A fish swimming in the ocean, maintaining the ecological balance that you were talking about in the sea, counts nothing until it's fished and served on a dish. So we just need to turn on its head the way we value nature, living nature, as much as the nature that we use and utilize, because we will continue to utilize nature as well. Living nature has no value today, in fact, even a negative value, because, as I said earlier, we subsidize activities that destroy nature. So it's just complete paradox of, we depend on nature, and yet we don't value it, and we destroy it with no cost.
The kind of seismic change you're talking about, it needs government policy. It needs a lot of reversal of government policies as well that are already in place. And unless, Jane, you have government setting ambitious policies to restore and protect nature, you're not going to get ultimately what's required. Where is the money? You won't get the private investment that's needed because the governments don't seem to have the money these days, right?
Yeah, but that's a question, as Marco was saying, about what we value and what we really understand. So if the real dependency on nature was really understood and factored into all government decision-making investments, we would be investing heavily in nature right now because the numbers are there. the fact is we just blind to those numbers. And yeah, we protect ourselves from the extreme events. So yeah, it's an interesting question, because I heard this morning someone say that managing climate was a global issue, but nature is really a local issue. And bringing back nature is really a local, community-led activity, and it needs to stay there. So I really believe in community-led nature conservation restoration, absolutely, but restoring the condition of the biosphere is a global responsibility. It's a global phenomenon that's happening, you know, and these tipping points like the Amazon forest, the Congo, the wetlands around the world, for example, when these tip, that has global consequences. The responsibility to prevent that happening is global, I believe, whilst the actors who will take that and put that into practice, they are local. They are living in, for example, Brazil for the Amazon, and they have the rights and the responsibilities there. But the global community needs to take its responsibility to enable that to happen. And so what is really needed in the sense of a global effort is to connect all the local efforts around the world, the sum of that to be a massive and rapid shift in a different direction. And yes, that's going to take some kind of big multilateral push. We've got the Global Biodiversity Framework. It says all the right things. It's not moving fast enough. But that framework is already a big step forward. It's now going to take a big push from civil society, working with cities, with companies, and with countries all together to turn that around.
But where is that momentum going to come from? I hate to say it. You know,
come back to Tice's
well, exactly.
presentation.
But then,
Yeah.
but with the situation in the United States, with the rollback of all environmental policy right now and the loss of momentum there, at this moment, and given the urgency of what we're talking about, where does it leave us?
Well, the United States is an important, powerful country, but it is only one part of the world. There is huge momentum growing for better managing our land and water and natural resources all over the world. And civil society is moving that. Public opinion needs to be lifted with messages of, with hope, with inspiration, supported by the tools and methods that they're there. We know what needs to be done, how to do it. But there isn't that real push yet, as
Sure.
you said. But that needs to rise up, and that will push public policy.
Okay. Gretel, do you want to come in on that?
Thank you. Well, you know, once I met these scientists who study other planets, climate in other planets, I thought that was incredible. And I asked him a question. It's true that there is no planet B. And he said, oh, why are you asking that question? Because you study the planets. And he says, well, actually, of course, there are other planets and we are studying them, but it will take us millions and millions of years to get there. But the most important thing he says is, you should not be asking that question because we have the perfect planet. And this planet was created for us, humans. And I always remember this, because when we talk about what do we need and what can we do to save our planet, and then we see the geopolitical situation today. I think that we're just losing the focus. I mean, it doesn't matter what geopolitically is happening now. Matter of fact is that if we as a society, as a planetary society, each of us don't take action, there will be no geopolitics because there will be no planet. So for me, just to see the attention of the world putting in what is going on in the United States, I'm sorry to say it, but I think we're losing the focus. We should be acting as one huge, big society that wants to have a planet where we can all thrive. It's not so difficult. Of course that I am not unrealistic. There are things happening, and it's not just in one country, it's in many countries that bad things are happening. But my motto is that we have to stay positive. And how do we stay positive? In believing, and I think that many of you will join me, that we still have an incredible, beautiful planet that supports us, that give us still, even we are treating the planet badly, we have a planet that still gives us goods and services that we are benefiting even today. We're speaking here, but we still have water, we still have many things. Yes, they are at risk, but let's take what we have and let's make it better, and let's not lose the focus. I mean, it is important not to deviate, by distractions while we achieve what we have to achieve, because it's about our own survival. And let me just bring to the table something that we have not discussed, which is the role of local communities and indigenous peoples, the people who are at the front line of these things. It's not necessarily it's not me necessarily, the ones who are here. It's the people who are on the ground, living the effects of climate change every day. It's the people who need healthy land for agriculture, to eat every day. Those are the ones who are at the front line. Sometimes we don't pay attention, but those are the same ones who are innovating and who are learning from the past, but also innovating for the future, and are bringing solutions that we need to look at and that we need to value. And that's why I like the Earthna Prize. And when Gonzalo invited me, I have to confess that I don't participate of these reviews normally. But when he mentioned it's about traditional knowledge, I couldn't resist. Because if we just take time to respect and learn from our people, the people who are there on the ground, I think that we will be amazing, all of us. So to value traditional knowledge, to innovate, to take that traditional knowledge and mix it with innovation, we have it all. We have to see it, and we have to be positive and think that we can, turn the tide and make it possible.
Yeah, well said. Radwan, Gretel there was talking about innovation and solutions. Tell us about some of the innovation solutions that are ongoing in Qatar with some of the projects that are happening in terms of ecosystem restoration, the mangroves and so forth.
Yeah, definitely Qatar is a kind of open sky stress testing lab, because as I mentioned, for example, we do have the hottest sea in the world here. So the harsh conditions that we are already experiencing in Qatar are the ones that other countries will be facing in the upcoming decades. So the research that we are doing here, the understanding of these mechanisms of adaptation that happened during those thousands of years, to understand how they happened here and try to make them happening in a faster way so that the species can cope with the changes that are happening with the climate change, could be one of those contributions of the research and the development and the innovation that is being done here in Qatar. And it's not, and it's for exactly that perspective that we are teaming with different companies that are developing their technologies for restoration here in Qatar. Why? Because they know that this is a very good place to prove the proof of concept for their technologies, because if it works here, it would be working in other places in the world, even if always the solutions should be context specific. But still, in terms of how harsh are the conditions here when we have in Qatar, the conservation or restoration technologies that you are developing here, you may be able to replicate them in a more effective way in other places in the world. So that's something also that we design, for example, artificial reefs, functional artificial reefs. We add, for example, on those artificial reefs, sexual and asexual propagation of species, the ones that are coral species, the ones that are the most resilient, that we go and collect when all the species are bleaching and you have only 5% of that reef that is not bleached. You collect some of those genotypes that are the most resilient, you propagate them sexually in the lab, and from that one colony you create thousands, if not already now, millions.
And then you could export them to other areas where perhaps they've lost their coral because of rising temperatures, and you then have corals that can deal with those kind of conditions.
Sure, you have some consideration to take so that you are not introducing new species or whatever, but what definitely in light of what you said, for example, the same species, which is Platygyra daidalia that we have here and we have in Oman, the same species have been crossbred in our labs here in Qatar, and from the father here from Qatar and the mother from Oman, and we demonstrated that the babies are more heat tolerant than the babies coming directly from Oman. What it means that this adaptation is vertically transmitted, so that you can use definitely some of our species to help other similar species in other places in the world developing breeds that are able to resist the heat that they will be facing in the future.
Fascinating. Marco, I want to just talk briefly, we're coming towards the end, we've got 8, 9 minutes, perhaps a bit less than that. Just about the political process, because at the moment we have two prongs, don't we? We've got two COPs going on, the climate, these big summits that happen every year. So you've got the climate summit, and then you have the biodiversity summit, two distinct prongs. But what you're all saying is that this is entwined, and it should be one process. And as we know, both those processes, and I've reported on many of them, are stultifying in their progress. I mean, there have been advances in 2015, with Paris was one of them. But isn't there a need to streamline things now?
Yes, I hope my UN friends won't take objection for what I'm saying. I think, obviously, yes, right? What we mentioned earlier, the connection between climate, and by the way, climate, nature and development, water security, health, food security, health, it's all part of the same agenda. That's why the beauty of the SDG is actually the framework that was tried to, for the first time, bring everything together. But I go back to the point Thijs was mentioning earlier on. When something becomes or is presented as too complicated, people switch off. And that's a human thing. And so, yes, coordination, yes, integration, yes, synergies, but let's not also be careful not to make a big, I can use this word without offending my own country, a spaghetti bowl, of everything together, then now we understand what to do because it's all. So humans are so good at solving one problem at a time, at focusing one thing, finding a solution. They're not very good at looking aside and connecting the dots. We need to do that increasingly. So, long answer to your question. Yes, we need more integration, but also let's not underestimate the power of the decisions and the plans that we already have agreed to. Nick, today, the most important thing is to deliver what we already agreed. A decarbonized economy and an economy which is going to deliver more nature, not less. This has been agreed by 200 countries a few years ago on both sides, biodiversity and climate. So we've got to deliver that. The plan is there. We've got to deliver it. And then the question is why we are not delivering it, because we just do not feel the pressure yet. But let's be honest, system change in our economy, society, in the way we live our life will happen. It's inevitable. The question is, do we want to choose ourselves to change, or do we want the change to be imposed by us, by nature? Because nature is lovely, but can be terrifying as well. And
Jay.
so, on that note, I hope it's not a negative one, but I'm saying, let me finish with another thing, which is a bit more positive. But honestly, we are playing with fire, literally. The nature reaction will be terrifying if you're not careful. But we have all the means intellectually. we understand, we have the financial resources, we have the technology, we have all the means to deliver what we already agreed to deliver, a carbon neutral, energy positive world. It's time to do it.
Okay. Jane, final word to you. A call to arms. It's changed on a huge scale, but the upside is also colossal, right?
It's colossal, but it's also a pretty exciting challenge. You know, we've got a short time to make massive transformation. We've got the science. What we need now is a bit of artistry to go with it, to come back to where we started this session. Because looking forward and planning forward, this needs to be a creative process. We can't put nature back, restore it how it was, like you restore a painting or something, because it's not static. It's continually evolving. So we have to create the new landscapes, the new cities of the future with all that evolution in mind, with all the different needs and how they're going to develop, with how climate is going to develop, all of this in mind. And this is a real creative challenge. So I'm really happy that here there's a big focus on architecture for the future and the idea of learning from the traditions of the past, but actually bringing that together with cutting-edge science and innovation to create, you know, new cities and extended cities which really take into account the needs of people. What we need to add to that is not only the needs of the local people, but the needs of the local environment and the nature and the natural systems.
All right, brilliant. Thank you very much. That's all we've got time for. Jane Madgett, Marco Lambertini, Gretel Aguilar, and Radwan Ben Hamadou, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.